The Kamatov or Kamov KA-26. It was actually a rather funny story. Like I say, I had actually built helicopters and other things before, and I had my German aircraft engineers to help. I had some very old German scientists on my side back then. Like I said, I'd done many things throughout the world and throughout the country, and like I say, I don't normally use outside help like aliens and other planets. Usually I just do in-planet stuff. I have done more than enough things that were really nice on this planet. So basically, the kamov 26 is actually a rather funny story. I had done helicopters before, and had done some helicopters and tanks and stuff like that. And when I was going to go build the Kamatov 26, it was actually the Renault car company or manufacturing company. It started around 1890, and then we were planning it around 19 something. We had done quite a few cars, and finally I was like, I want to build a helicopter. I haven't built a helicopter in a long time, and I really want to do a helicopter. So we started working on it and stuff like that, and we went to go to sell it to the public. And I had already figured out that basically the civilian public can't have a single rotor because we had done tests where we had taken someone and just been like, here, fly a helicopter, and they could not fly it at all. No, it took them 30 minutes or 3 hours at least to learn how to fly a helicopter. So I was like, okay, so for the civilian market, single rotor is out. Just out. I was like, don't even bother. So, but that meant we had to do, for a dual rotor, that meant we had to do this really complicated gearbox where one shaft comes in like this and one shaft goes like this. And it took over 3 years or 5 years just to make the gearbox. They had and then we were having problems with the steel, of course, because we had to upgrade the steel because normal steel would wear out. And what I think we ended up doing was basically just charging more for the helicopter and basically guaranteeing the gearbox for some period of time. Basically, we knew the gearbox or the metallurgy in the gearbox wasn't good enough. We knew that in 5 years' time it would have to be replaced or rebuilt. So we guaranteed it for the 5 years' time and to basically built 2 gearboxes, or basically built the gearboxes for the ones for sale, and then figured when they stripped out, we would just replace them with the better metallurgy, and been working on the metallurgy the whole time. Basically, we had normal steel or whatever. The steel was good, and it would last for about 2 years or a year, no problem. Maybe 3 or 4 years at most. And then the gearbox would be worn out, stripped, and basically toast, no matter what. Because it's a very complicated, it goes out, and then it makes a 90-degree corner, and then it goes into the shaft, and then which means it makes another 90, and you're turning this outside shaft, and then you have this other gearbox which comes out, makes a 90, and then comes up, and then makes another thing, and it looks like a pumpkin kind of, and it goes up. So it's a lot of big gear bends and a lot of other stuff, and so with all that wear, and there's also a lot of heat involved too, with taking all that power and transferring it all throughout those things. It would have been easier just to take the engine and put it underneath and then up, but then you can't do. Well, it would have been easier if we could have. We should have probably maybe we did think about putting both engines underneath there, side by side, vertical. But then again, we had another problem. If we did vertical like that, the oil dripping on the engines. The engines don't like to be like engines don't actually like to be like this. The engines like to be like this. And so with the air cooled one, we could have probably done, and we messed around with all these different kinds of things. Anyway, though. And we finally settled on, I was like, well, let's just go ahead and mount them like this and see what happens in pods. I was like, why don't you just go ahead and do it the hard way, and then we'll think about the other ways. And so I actually had 3 teams total working on this, basically. I had quite a group, probably about 1,500 people working on the different ways that we could do the engine. But first of all, we just went for this. Anyway, it was a complicated gearbox assembly, and the first gears they would strip out in about 6 months or a year, and we were working on getting the metal off the snuff. Anyway, though, but basically we went to go sell it. We finally got it perfected, and everything was right, and we went to go to sell it to the public, and the bureaucracy at the time said, no. You can't release a helicopter. You can't sell a helicopter. We won't let you. You have never done. Where's your flight training? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, I'm Lucifer. I can do whatever I want, basically. Well, my people did. My people said, we work for Lucifer. We can do whatever we want. And and we had already had them in production and everything. We were already, I don't know if we are going full production or not, but we were going to produce them basically, and it basically went down to pretty much, well, fine, I'll offer them only in my country. And then I said, and by the way, how much for your country? And they literally wrote a price down on a piece of paper, and then I said, fine, buy it. And I bought their country. Ching! I forget which country it was exactly, but one of the countries was like, you can't sell that in our country. We won't let you. You don't have it. You don't have the proper. And I said, how much for your country? And I literally we just wrote them a check. And that's what, and that's what my people would say too later on. That adult manufacturing people would say, we just wrote them a check for the amount of money that they wanted. They should have asked for more. My Renault people would, my lawyers, my Renault people would say, they should have asked for more. They just picked a number, and basically, we just wrote them a check. Good at your local bank, or any bank. So, anyway, like I said, in Russia, I had found rubles or rubies. I had found rubies in Russia or something like that. There were some rubies in Russia. There's this big tall mountain basically, and basically I started mining and digging underneath it, and we found the tallest mountain we could possibly find. Then we went down, and then we went under it, and we were basically like dig. Rubies, rubies. We found rubies and emeralds, or rubies and some other stones. That's why they call it the currency for Russia is rubles. What that actually meant is I was actually rubies. I found rubies, and then I sold them. I sold them to people who wanted them, and then Russia had a currency. Russia's currency at first was rubies, and then we started actually having a real currency, and actually Russia's currency was actually backed by precious stones. That's something that most people don't know. But nobody wanted to live in Russia. Russia was this cold Arctic wasteland, basically. Most of Russia, other than my whaling camp. I had this whaling camp that was way up on the corner of Russia. Way up there. There's this city now, or whatever, that was my sardine, and they did sardines and whales. And whale oil. And other fishing things. They did cold water fish. And they were up there just off the corner. It's a major city, I think, now. But anyway, though. And I had a cannery there. Fish and stuff is great in cold climates because you don't even need to refrigerate it. You can just truck it across the wasteland if you have a railway there. Anyway, because it's so cold there, like most of the time of the year or something, or at least a majority of the year, that you can just ship things and not have to worry about refrigeration. You actually have to worry about frost burn. So up there, so no one wanted to live there. No one liked it. And no one considered it valuable. So I just bought a whole, and so no one was really there. I just bought a whole bunch of land, and then we found metal and coal and all kinds of stuff there. And eventually I was like, woohoo! So Russia is just basically my mining colony, pretty much, and my fishing colony. Anyway, though, yeah, I hear it's a pretty nice place, though, or something like that. But, and making people enjoy Russia was an issue because it's not nice there, I hear. I've never been there. But I've heard about it, and my people, like I said, when the snow would thaw, it'd basically be this mushy wasteland that basically they would use sleds to cross. They would take a horse to the other side, they would drive a post in, and then they would tie a rope to this thing, and they would winch the sleds across. They would literally you could see pictures of people in Russia. They would drive this giant post into the ground, or this post in the ground, or use this frame basically. They would basically get this thing, and then they would use these ropes, or they'd find a tree and tie to a tree, basically, and they use this thing. They go, and like 5-6 people would pull, and they would pull the sled across this muddy wasteland. That's how they got around Russia. They basically use sleds and just stick the logs in, and basically push them, and the rope would wrap around the thingy. And they go, and they'd use a tabernacle to come back and go around the post again, and then they would just wind it around. One rope going this way, one rope going, that way. Anyway, and then they would just wind around, round and round and round and round, just pulling it, and they would pull the sleds across the frozen wasteland through the mud, because you couldn't. In Russia, basically,